I must say, if I can break the protocols, that was a most lovely and delicious citation which you conferred upon me, Mr. President, but I did feel as though my life was in the past tense. So I shall attempt to retrieve fractures of it now. Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, the distinguished faculty, and you know, graduates, that your faculty verges on angelic perfection. And all of you here who are graduates and family and friends, and the sense in the room that you would all love to collectively levitate at this moment in time. It's a delicious celebratory occasion, and I'm tremendously honored to be an honorary degree recipient and to participate in this convocation. I'm particularly delighted to be here because the Chancellor is a friend. He's an extraordinarily effective and able legal scholar in my experience, but also a lovely, decent, and compassionate human being. He actually sits on the board of my foundation, where I can tell him what to do on a daily basis. And he, in an appropriate obeisance, pays no heed whatsoever to my remarks. I'm also tickled to be here for obvious reasons. I'm a democratic socialist. I feel as though I'm in the Holy Land. The only progressive fiefdom left in Canada. My heart is quaking with exhilaration. But let me not abuse the time which I've been given. This is for me, believe it or not, a kind of last hurrah. I've had the benefit of a variety of honorary degrees. I think a surfeit would be appropriate as a description, and it's time to bring it to an end. So I'm going to see this as my last honorary degree. I'm going to speak from the heart, as Katie Lang said in her words in that magnificent Nobel recipient video, and I want to make some unvarnished remarks. And if you find the remarks unpalatable, then you can usher me out of town. I shall not be offended, I assure you. Graduates who are collected here, I normally, in a convocation speech, exhort students to go out and change the world, to finish the collaboration in the university that you've experienced over the years, and then to take what you know and the convictions you have and go out and improve the human condition and do what the President said, make the world we inhabit better for all of us. I thought it was a lovely choice of words. And that seems to me to be an appropriate nostrum for a situation like this. But even though I still feel that way, I have a different propulsion. I have a kind of feeling that you go out and not simply change the world, but as a result of the election in the United States, you go out and save the world. That is what I would seek you to do. On January the 20th, Donald Trump will become the most powerful man on the planet, leading the most powerful nation on the planet. And I must say that none of us will escape the reverberations of what happens. Even today, on the front page of the Globe and Mail, there was a news story about the renegotiation of NAFTA, which is in the offing, which may well involve a considerable clamor around lumber and cattle, and that may have negative consequences for this country. But what is so remarkable is that all of you as graduates in this year, at this moment in time, I kind of can't get over it. I imagine you'll never forget it. You have been witness to the most extraordinary phenomenon of a man becoming President of the United States who regularly espoused xenophobia, racism, and misogyny, and stoked the fires of hate, which then turned out in large numbers to elect him. And there's never been a situation like that in Western democracies, not once. You're witness to something that has never occurred before. And it's in some ways quite terrifying to see in 2016 that the Ku Klux Klan in the United States celebrates the election of an American president, and that misogynists everywhere salivate over the oppression of women which his election may bring. Most of us have no idea what to expect. I'm not sure anyone, including the president-elect, knows what to expect. But there are two facts which I think are reasonably clear, and I simply want to reconnoiter them because it seems to me that they speak directly to the lives you will lead hereafter. The first is climate change. There is no issue on the planet that is more important. There is nothing that will mold the future of societies that is more important. The apocalyptic consequences of the road we are now on are real, and it is terribly important for countries generally to understand and to collaborate collectively on turning back the tide of the discharge of carbon and the extraordinary consequences of climate and global warming. And yet we have now in the White House in the United States a man who is determined to withdraw the United States from the Paris Accord, the one international agreement where countries finally came together and where in the aftermath the United States and China came together. A president of the United States who has no use for a carbon tax, a president of the United States who is positively intoxicated by oil and natural gas and the possibility of resurrecting coal, a man who has no interest whatsoever in renewable energy. We have occupying the most important country in the world as the most powerful man on the planet, someone who regards climate change as some kind of doctrinal mythology, who is a total denialist. And it's terrifying because the consequences for the planet are overwhelming. And it means that all of us somehow have to come together over the next several years and demonstrate that it is intolerable and that we will resist it. I have 4 grandsons. They're 14, 12, 6, and 4 years of age. And I look at them and I love them the way a grandfather loves his grandsons. And I think to myself, what in God's name is going to happen to these kids down the road? And how is it that less than 10 days ago, everything turned around from the incipient optimism which we began to feel to the unsettling despair with which we are now coping? But the second area, and I will admit to you without hesitation that it means more to me than anything else, is what it's going to mean for women and gender equality. Over the years that I've worked internationally, and I don't pretend there's anything special about it because the world is filled with activists who care about social change, but over the years what I've learned is that the single most important issue on the planet is the struggle for gender equality. You cannot continue to marginalize more than 50% of the world's population and expect ever to approximate human decency or human equity. And yet we now have in the White House someone who regards women and girls in the most scornful way, a kind of imbecilic, male, moronic sexism, which so diminishes women and girls that it takes your breath away. And within that country, they will soon appoint, Donald Trump will soon appoint, a judge to the Supreme Court of the United States who will turn back Roe versus Wade. There will be no longer the rights to abortion. Reproductive rights will be whittled away. Planned Parenthood will lose its funding. All of the issues which have animated the needs and rights of women across the planet, particularly global public health, which hits women so hard when they don't have public health because of poverty, because of disease. All of the range of international issues, international sexual trafficking, female genital mutilation, child marriage, inheritance rights, property rights, sexual violence, that whole panoply of rights that we're struggling to receive and to achieve for women and girls, they're regarded with contempt and indifference by the President of the United States. How is that possible? What has happened that causes such concern in every corridor? We couldn't even in the United Nations, I point out to you, manage to elect a Secretary General or to appoint a Secretary General who was a woman after 70 years continuous of male Secretaries General. And now we have someone who sees that as the arc of triumph rather than the arc of negligence. These are tough times ahead. And somehow, through a Herculean effort, we have to overcome what is happening so that Canada's values can prevail. Look, I'm a kind of geriatric recipient. I'm inching into my dotage. Thank God I still have an approximate voice. I look around at my own life and I ask myself 1,000 times, how did the world allow millions of people to die from HIV and AIDS when we had antiretroviral drugs to keep them alive? And why does it still continue? I ask myself, how can it be that 15 million girls under the age of 18 are married off every year? Marriages which are fundamentally a crime, marriages which render them into slaves in the household, where the older man who marries them feels entitled to rape them whenever his will, his sexual appetites require. How did it happen that we watched the Rwandan genocide as the world stood back and witnessed the carnage and raised nary a finger? How is it possible to see the horrific scenes of Syria or Yemen or the Central African Republic or the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Libya? What has happened to this world that it unravels in front of us, and we somehow cannot bring together the response that will humanize and civilize international society? And now we have been set back even further. And you know what drives me crazy about it all? Is that children, little children, by the millions, are collateral damage in this world. We bomb hospitals, we bomb schools, we abduct kids by the thousands, we destroy their little lives, and we sit back sanctimoniously and discuss it in diplomatic circles. And now we have someone in the White House who fundamentally doesn't give a tinker's damn. So I say to all you graduates, I don't care whether it's an NGO you join, or a political party, or a civil service, or you use your wondrous professional disciplines honed here at the University of Alberta. I don't care how you employ them, but I beg you to understand that the world has turned. It hasn't just changed, it's turned. And your collective response, moral, principled, determined, tenacious, indefatigable, it can save this world, and I beg you to do so. Thank you so much for honoring me.